So for these guys, you absolutely cannot cohab king snakes. The name king in their name is given to them because in the wild they will. How's it going, guys? Johnny from the Tye-Dyed Iguana, and today I'm doing a care guide on the Mexican Black Kingsnake, also known as the Lampropeltis Getula negrita. These guys are found in northern Mexico, southern US, like Arizona, the Sonora Desert, things like that. You can expect about a 4 or 5 foot snake when they reach adult size. They do live about 15 to 20 years. They are most known, obviously, for their striking all black color. They eat very, very well. We'll get into that a bit later. This is my personal snake, Ursula. I've had her about a year and some change. I would guess she's around 18 months old, coming up on 3 feet long. She's a big girl. They are strictly carnivores. They do eat, mice, rats, things of that nature. About once every 5 to 7 days as babies, they do eat really, really well. They eat amazing. Once they reach adult size, I recommend, about once a week, once every 10 days or so. So the prey size on these guys, they are a relatively slender snake, so overfeeding can cause impaction, kind of strain on their muscles, things like that. So make sure the prey size on these guys is no thicker than the widest part of their body. You see on her, that's, something like this. You don't want it to be overwhelming, give them too large of a bulge, they'll have an issue digesting, things like that. She is currently on weaned mice. She eats multiple weaned mice, just so I don't want to fatten her up too quick. She eats 2 weaned mice every, 7 to 10 days. She's a little weird with her routine of eating, but she definitely doesn't miss a meal, So these guys transition really, really well onto frozen thawed because of that severe hunger drive. I feel like sometimes they could eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So transitioning them over to frozen is much, much easier than with other species who are a little finicky with eating. These guys, if you have a ball pythons and other things like that are a little bit stressful because they go a couple months without eating, these guys are your kind of snake because they absolutely will not miss a meal. They'll eat every single time you offer them a rat. They eat really, really well, so I always recommend feeding a separate feeding bin. I recommend that with all snakes, but these in particular. They do have a bit of a reputation for being a bit food aggressive, so it's best to get them, not used to eating in the enclosure. Speaking of the enclosure, for a baby Mexican Black Kingsnake, I'd recommend a tank size. The store minimum we say is about a 10-gallon. They are a quite active species of snake. Going up to a 20 or a 40 isn't, a bad idea. That being said, they do, climb, they will dig, things like that. So it's best to give them tons of clutter, tons of things to do. For an adult of these, I would recommend a minimum of 40. Again, minimum, bigger is always better with these guys. They do move quite a bit, so going to a 75 or a 120 4x2x2, something like that would be, pretty beneficial. Another thing with these guys is they do like to dig, so having a loose sort of substrate. Aspen is, Aspen would work really well. I personally use a bit more of a dirt, more of a natural substrate. I have pretty good success with that, holds humidity right at that. They need about 30 to 60%, it can fluctuate. The soil keeps pretty good, right at about 40 to 50, not a whole lot of spraying that you have to do, maybe once a week with a spray bottle, but that's kind of an optional personal preference. Like I said, they do dig, so a lot of the times you want to give them enough soil depth to dig and dig around and at least fully submerge their body, about 2 to 4 inches, if not more. And temperatures for these guys are going to be, a hot side of like the high 80s, 87, 88, 89, maybe up to 90 degrees. But with a cool end of about 70, it can get pretty, cool where they're from down south. At night, they do, enjoy a relatively significant night drop as well. So lighting with these guys is relatively important. They do need their heat. I have her in a 40-gallon tank. She's going into a 120 here soon. She currently has a 75-watt basking bulb on. Because of the variety of tank size, different things like that you can choose from, there is a very big variety of bulbs you can choose from. If you ever do have any questions about that, feel free to ask anybody here at the shop and we'll point you in the right direction. Another thing is, since they are nocturnal, UVB is not absolutely required. However, in my personal experience, again, it is very, very beneficial. I'll notice her basking quite a bit more often. She's much more active with the UVB, and you'll notice significantly more iridescence when they shed. A lot of like rainbow pattern, it looks almost like an oil spill. Their colors pop a bit more in the UVB. So again, it's not absolutely required, but it is something that I do recommend to everybody who comes in the store. Just, it's gonna make their life a little bit more enjoyable. So one thing that I've noticed with these guys personally is they do enjoy water. I've noticed her drinking out of it, bathing in it, soaking in it, things like that. So I do recommend a water bowl, that she can fully submerge herself in, just so she has it given the opportunity. I also recommend using bottled water or a RepuSafe to get the chlorines and chemicals out of that water. Change your water bowl daily just so any mold, mildew, bacteria, things like that don't grow, and you'll have a happy snake. So for these guys, you absolutely cannot cohab king snakes. The name king in their name is given to them because in the wild they will eat other snakes. So if you have more than one king snake in the tank, one might turn into a meal for the other. So we never recommend more than one just for that reason. They do eat each other. So the only time in captivity they would be together would be for breeding purposes. But even then, breeding king snakes is a bit tough because again, they eat each other. So you would really have to monitor the breeding and make sure that everything's safe. They're similar sizes, things like that. So a daily care for Ursula is, wake up and I'll say it's a day that I'm misting her tank. Like I said, I do that maybe once or twice a week. Maybe miss their tank. You spot clean their tank. They don't go to the bathroom super often, so it is relatively easy since they only eat once a week. Spot clean the tank. I have an automated timer. You can get one of those at the shop, so I don't have to worry about turning the light on, turning it off, anything like that. One thing with aspen is if you do use aspen, I don't recommend a mister because over misting can cause mildew, mold, things like that to grow. But other than that, you would make sure there's no mess, no urates, no poop, anything like that on the tank. If there is, just clean that up, grab the water bowl, put a few drops of the ReptiSafe in it or use bottled water, scrub that water bowl and, refill that water bowl. Every once in a while, you could sift through the soil, make sure there's nothing buried, nothing hidden underneath that you missed the first time. But yeah, day to day, she's relatively simple. She definitely likes coming out. She's very active, so she's fun to watch. She moves all the time. When they're young, sometimes they can be a bit wiry. They are relatively small at birth, so they can be a bit wiry, a bit small, a bit quick moving, but they mature very, very well with age. They definitely slow down. They're a lot more tame, a lot more handleable. A very, very fun snake to hold if you like constantly moving. As you see, she moves all the time. With your ball pythons, they'll sit in your lap. These guys will almost never hold still. So it's a lot more active of a snake to hold. It almost feels like you're actually holding her, actually having to do something. So it makes it really, really fun. Alrighty, well thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you learned something. Like, subscribe, anything like that. And you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.